They called the cops on my grandpa for fishing behind his own house. Yeah, that's real. 1 minute, Grandpa Art's casting his line, same spot he's fished for 20 years, same peaceful October morning sun coming up over the lake. And the next minute, the queen of the HOA herself, Debbie Jenkins, is marching across our backyard like she's Moses parting the Red Sea. Only difference is, instead of a staff, she's armed with a clipboard and a fresh set of made-up rules. You ever deal with someone who thinks rules matter more than common sense? Buckle up. Because what happened next turned a quiet Sunday into a showdown with enough twists to make your head spin. I was Tyler Miller, just 30, buried in work at the kitchen table when I heard Debbie's voice, sharp enough to strip paint off the siding floating through the window. I peeked out, and there she was, standing in front of Grandpa, arms crossed, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else than negotiating with a 75-year-old retired engineer in waiters. Debbie, in her 50s hair sprayed to perfection, has been running Lakeside Serenity like her own private fiefdom for 3 years now. Folks used to wave at each other around here. These days, most people keep their heads down and check their mailbox heights before work just to avoid her wrath. "Sir, you need to stop fishing immediately and leave this area," she snapped, her voice carrying that perfect mix of fake sweetness and real menace, like a kindergarten teacher who's just about done pretending she likes kids. "This is community property, and you're in violation of our newly updated regulations." Grandpa barely looked up from his bobber calm as ever. "Ma'am, this is private property," he told her, steady as a rock. "Got the deed, the survey, everything you need. This shoreline's ours. Been fishing here since we moved in. Never had a problem with anyone until now." If looks could kill, Debbie would have put him in the ground right there. "I don't care what you think you own," she barked, waving her phone like it was a badge. "HOA says all waterfront areas are shared. Your little hobby is disrupting the community's peace." She pointed at Grandpa's handmade fishing area sign like it was evidence in a criminal trial. "Unauthorized signage, remove it or I'll remove it for you." Now, maybe it was the way Grandpa kept his cool, or maybe Debbie just needed an audience, but suddenly she's dialing 911. There's an elderly man trespassing on community property. He's refusing to leave and becoming aggressive. You could hear the fake panic in her voice like she was auditioning for a soap opera. I started recording from the window, coffee going cold in my hand. 20 minutes later, Officer Johnson pulled up looking like a guy who's seen every HOA spat under the sun. Debbie launches into her whole act. Grandpa hands over his waterproof folder of deeds and surveys. Johnson barely glances at the paperwork before turning to Debbie and telling her with all the patience of a man who'd rather be anywhere else, "Ma'am, this is private property. If you believe there's a legitimate issue, you'll need to resolve it through legal channels. This isn't a police matter." Debbie looked ready to explode. "This isn't over, old man," she hissed, storming off with promises to use every tool at her disposal to shut down Grandpa's little operation. But Debbie didn't realize she'd just picked a fight with the wrong family, and Grandpa's stubborn streak runs deep. 2 days later, a letter arrives, official HOA logo, big red urgent stamp. Inside, a laundry list of accusations: violating community use, disrupting peace, non-compliance, creating a hostile environment. Not a single citation matched anything in the original HOA handbook. Turns out Debbie had started sending similar letters to other lakefront owners threatening fines if anyone dared support us. Neighbors who used to wave now wouldn't even make eye contact. She was trying to isolate us using fear to keep everyone in line. But Debbie made a mistake. Early Thursday, I found a brand new no fishing $500 fine sign hammered right into our backyard 10 steps from the porch. Someone had trespassed during the night just to stick it there. The hypocrisy was almost funny if it wasn't so infuriating. I took photos from every angle. Grandpa just stared at it, jaw clenched, then finally said, "Tyler, I think it's time we looked into exactly what authority this HOA really has." That kicked off a 3-day dive into Old County Records property surveys and the HOA charter. What I found: the original plans from 1999 gave every lakefront owner private water rights. The HOA's power stopped at landscaping and architecture, nothing about dictating private recreation. Even better, I tracked down Susan Clark, an 80-year-old original resident retired librarian record keeper extraordinaire. She'd kept everything from the community's founding. When I explained our mess, she just shook her head. Debbie's been pulling this nonsense for years, she said, pulling out folders of warning letters, fake citations, and notes about Debbie photographing mailboxes and measuring lawn gnomes like some kind of suburban KGB. Then came the twist, an anonymous note in our mailbox. Check the HOA storage room. Spare keys under the third planter. Only after 10 p.m. when Debbie's done with her patrol. The specifics were eerie, but Susan had all the backup I needed. Original survey maps, HOA charters, even development agreements, all showing clear as daylight. Our shoreline was ours, and Debbie had zero say. More, she'd been doing this for years, to anyone who questioned her. We put it all together, documents, photos, records, Susan's testimony, and waited for the next HOA meeting, which Debbie called as an emergency to address the threat we posed. She put on a show, slideshows, enlarged photos, claims we'd falsified documents, accusations we were endangering the community. The room was tense, folks buying every word until I stood up and laid the real evidence on the table. Survey maps, deeds, witnesses. Then Susan Clark in her quiet voice stood and told everyone Debbie had been lying for years. The crowd turned. Suddenly everyone had a story, fines for planting flowers, threats for kids' play sets, rules nobody had ever seen in writing. Debbie's face drained of color. She tried to bluster about needing legal review, but the tide had turned. Residents started demanding her resignation right there. But Debbie wasn't done yet. Days later, we got a certified letter from her lawyers, threats of defamation, demands we cease harassment, even a claim for $50,000 in damages. Meanwhile, she emailed the whole neighborhood claiming we'd stolen confidential documents and were plotting to bankrupt the HOA. She hired private security, started calling up neighbors, spinning stories about us suing to raise fees on everyone. The pressure worked for some. Neighbors turned cold. Then someone vandalized Grandpa's fishing spot, spray paint broken glass, the works. Grandpa just sat on the porch, sadder for the poison Debbie had spread than for the mess itself. I decided to push back. Digging into Debbie's background, I found she'd been fired from her last job for abusive behavior and, even better, had built her own unauthorized deck and was running a craft business from home, violating the very rules she shoved down everyone else's throat. I wrote her a letter: resign now and end this, or I'll take every bit of evidence public. She didn't back down. Instead, she filed a lawsuit, $50,000 for emotional distress triggering legal discovery and opening every skeleton in her closet to daylight. Our lawyer, James Mitchell, real estate pitbull, took one look and saw grounds for a massive countersuit fraud misuse of HOA funds harassment. Turns out Debbie had used association money for her legal bills, imposed fines for fake violations, and threatened families for years. We countered with a lawsuit of our own requesting her removal, full audit, and $100,000 in punitive damages. But our lawyer had a better idea: mediation. There he offered Debbie a deal our family would allow all residents to use our shoreline in exchange for a $2,000 annual fee, Debbie's immediate resignation, and a public apology. Under the cold glare of the courthouse lights, Debbie realized she was finished. She accepted, broken and silent. News spread fast. The new HOA president, a retired teacher, kind but firm, scrapped most of Debbie's fake rules, restored the original charter, and signed off on our shoreline agreement. Grandpa used the fee to add stone benches, wildflowers, and a proper dock, turning the shoreline into the gathering place it was meant to be. Neighbors started talking again, sharing burgers at the community BBQ, kids building sandcastles, laughter echoing where fear used to live. Debbie showed up once after all was said and done. She looked older, humbled. Her apology wasn't perfect, but it was real. Grandpa took her hand, told her everyone deserves a shot at being better. That's the thing about real community. It forgives even after everything. Now, Grandpa sits by the lake fishing line, trailing in the water, surrounded by neighbors who've learned the difference between power and leadership. The old handmade sign is gone, replaced by a new one, Lakeside Serenity Community Shoreline, sponsored by the Miller family, maintained by the HOA. And every time I walk past, I'm reminded that the best wins aren't about beating someone, they're about making things right for everyone. So let me ask you, have you ever had to stand up to someone drunk on power? What did you do? What would you tell someone facing their own neighborhood bully? Drop your stories below, because if there's one thing we all learn, it's that the real strength in any community comes from people who aren't afraid to stand together for what's right. Sometimes all it takes is one fish to start a war and one family to help bring peace back home.